Living Planet Index has come out with an interesting study, and it says that animal populations have halved in 40 years, which is completely insane. We've got some info for you. The report says that humans are cutting down trees more quickly than they can regrow, harvesting more fish than the oceans can restock, pumping water from rivers and aquifers faster than rainfall can replenish them, and emitting more carbon than oceans and forests can absorb. Got a little more for you. Populations of mammals, birds, reptiles, amphibians, and fish have declined by an average of 52% over the course of the last 40 years. Populations of freshwater species have suffered an even worse fall of 76%. In Ghana, the lion population in one reserve is down 90% in 40 years. Globally, habitat loss and hunting have reduced tigers from 100,000 a century ago to just 3,000. So I don't want to get totally caught up in all the numbers of that, and I'm sure someone else is going to come out with a study saying that's not true and that the lions in Ghana had some weird disease or some other thing like that. But there's obviously some sort of trend here. And this weekend, because I can relate anything back to a science fiction movie, I watched Avatar, and this is pretty much what it's about. Like, eventually we are just going to rape this earth of everything it's got, and we're going to ruin the water, and we're going to pollute the air, and we're going to kill the animals, and we're doing it already. Yeah. And that's why Japan is literally right now building a staircase to space. Did you know about that? By 2050, they're building this elevator, a staircase. That would be something. Get all these fat fucks on a staircase. No, an elevator to space. And that's what this all made me think. So that's sort of where I want to take this conversation. Are we just wrecking, forgetting the specifics of this study? Right. Like, are we just, and we're doing it, we're knowingly doing it right now, right?
We absolutely are, and yeah, and forgetting the specifics, because it's really difficult to say that, you know, we've halved the population of something when we can't even really account for the vast number of species, right? So that's really, really difficult to do. Yeah. But it is troubling to hear that we are eliminating so many species and that we don't seem to really care. I think that's where the issue is. Like, we're starting to care more and more about like global warming, but at least I don't hear it very often, or you don't see it very often in the media. They're like, oh, this species just went extinct. It happens all the time, that it's no longer sort of interesting to hear that this or this happened. Yeah,
are we just excelling Darwin's theory, basically? Like, it's evolution kind of like, and we're at the top, so we're just making everything go faster for those poor guys on the bottom.
Organisms that have improved fitness, organisms that thrive versus organisms that die off, if we're actually talking about true Darwinian evolution, natural selection, is an organism that thrives is one that can adapt to a changing environment. But historically, the environment didn't change nearly as rapidly as we're forcing it to change, which means that the mechanisms at play, the way that an organism would have a mutation and then breed and then eventually take over its population, it can't keep up. So nobody has an option to thrive. Nobody has an option to survive, which is why species are dying left and right. And it is incredibly depressing. There's a famous kind of cartoon that you can Google, and I feel really bad that I don't know the name of the artist. So Google it, and
we'll find it.
We'll find. Okay, great. Yeah. And it's called The Fence, and it shows, you know, in the first frame, a really lush green earth. And this is, you know, 200,000 years ago. We didn't have agriculture. We didn't have. We were hunter-gatherers, and we were living with nature. And then it shows all these different iterations until we finally get to this really brown earth with a tiny little fence. And in between, it says things like, we call it a fence. It protects our livestock from wild animals. And you have all these small areas that are fenced in. And eventually, it completely flips to where we call it a fence. It protects the wildlife from us. It makes a nature preserve. And that's really where we are now. Wildlife is fenced in, whereas we used to fence ourselves in from the wild. The wild isn't even the wild now. We are the major apex predators, and we have, as you said before, I think it's an appropriate term, albeit one that's maybe a little insensitive, we have raped the planet of its resources.
Yeah, I don't even see it as insensitive, because that to me is what the planet is. It can't defend itself. It does bounce back sometimes, and another side, Jurassic Park, you know, life will find a way. So nature does find a way.
We will not destroy planet Earth. We will make planet Earth inhabitable for humans, and we will die off. And nature will find a way to subsist. We'll take a lot of species with us, but then they will be able to rebuild and repopulate our Earth. We need to think,
the cockroaches will be climbing over our dead bodies.
Cockroaches and jellyfish.
The cockroaches are going to be going up that elevator in Japan. Does it matter if certain species disappear, like the dodo bird, you know, like that's the famous one, that the dodo bird disappeared. But you know, partly like it's like there's an emotional piece, like, oh, I wish that species still existed, but maybe it doesn't matter if maybe some of these things are supposed to have an expiration date. I'm doing a little devil's advocate here, but you know.
I mean, you know, I think we're all interconnected though. Like you can say that, okay, the dodo species maybe wasn't that important, but it's really hard to determine what type of impact that particular species had on the environment. Perhaps we didn't eat the dodo bird. I'm not even sure if people did that, but you know, it could have been a keystone species. Like there are very different functions that animals play, and it disrupts the ecosystem when you take one player out. And we don't know how the ecosystem will change and will shift in response to that, and that's where I think it gets dangerous.
And I think the point that you just made, when you take one player out, is a good point. We physically take these players out. If they were falling out because of natural pressures, that would be different. We are killing them off because of our behavior, and I think that that's a totally different kind of judgment.
Right, and right now we're having all these studies about how bee populations are dying, and bees, we need to pollinate things so other things can grow, and it's just...
Think about sharks, like massive apex predators in the ocean, large fish. We're overfishing sharks, which is horrible, but we're also overfishing swordfish and tuna. Like the ocean is being absolutely depleted, not just from overfishing, but because of the massive amounts. The ocean is a carbon sink, and it's having to take in too much carbon, and it's becoming acidic because of that.
Yeah, all right, so last thought on this is the biggest problem with this is that it all happens so slowly and over the course of so many years and decades that there's never like suddenly an instant that wakes everybody up, because there's just this slow degradation of what's going on here, so nobody ever wakes up to it, right?
Especially because we don't see it. As you know, Cara mentioned, we have the wildlife fenced in, right? And we're completely removed from it. You know, we see our food and wildlife and nuggets all the time on our plate, and there's no connection. We literally turn chicken nuggets
into the shape of dinosaurs. Like it's completely fucking bonkers. Like,
it's true. I think though, to your point, it happens so slowly. Yes, but it depends on your scale, because it's actually happening significantly faster than nature would have ever allowed before. These things should be happening on the scale of hundreds of thousands to millions of years, and it's happening on the scale of decades now. So even though it's slow for our human eyes, it's definitely not slow in the grand scheme of things.